There is a dangerous misunderstanding about experience that quietly destroys human potential. Most people believe that simply surviving the passage of time generates wisdom. It does not. Today, we're exploring the secret difference between those who merely age and those who become extraordinarily dangerous, calm, and impossible to destabilize.
Absolutely. And welcome to the deep dive. The core premise we are investigating today is incredibly stark. Time alone teaches nothing, you know. Repetition alone changes nothing.
Our mission today is to understand how you can transform isolated, painful, or even just random lived moments into into invisible leverage systems.
Mm.
Because we are looking at a truly fascinating contrast here. You see some individuals who spend 20 years accumulating powerful internal leverage.
And then on the flip side, other individuals spend those exact same 20 years completely trapped in a loop. They are repeating the identical emotional patterns, just under slightly different circumstances, over and over.
Wow, it really is a trap. But to understand how you actually pull this hidden lever of experience, we first must dismantle the toxic advice the modern world constantly feeds us about how to grow.
Precisely. Because modern culture actively encourages us to move fast, to consume endlessly, and to constantly seek novelty. We're sold this idea that accumulating data is somehow synonymous with accumulating wisdom.
I mean, you see it everywhere. People listening to audio at double speed, trying to hack their way to wisdom.
Definitely. And the result of this relentless consumption is a widespread epidemic of informational obesity.
Informational obesity. I love that phrasing. You are referring to people who collect massive amounts of content but completely fail to metabolize it.
Spot on. They know thousands of inspirational quotes. They listen to endless hours of high-level audio analysis. They can recite the core principles of philosophy or business strategy perfectly, yet they possess zero embodied understanding.
Which creates individuals who appear intellectually formidable on paper, I imagine.
Absolutely. They look great on paper, but they remain emotionally fragile the very moment they are placed under actual pressure. They have the vocabulary of growth, but they lack the physical and emotional scars required to turn that vocabulary into instinct.
Let's unpack this. If someone is aggressively consuming 100 books a year or constantly listening to high-level analysis, aren't they inherently building leverage through sheer volume of knowledge? I mean, they are exposing themselves to the greatest minds in history. It seems counterintuitive to suggest that someone dedicating that much time to learning is not building a massive internal advantage.
What's fascinating here is the fundamental distinction between knowledge and leverage. Knowledge alone is definitely not leverage. Unprocessed information simply creates the dangerous illusion of competence.
The illusion of competence, because it hasn't been tested.
Precisely. True leverage is processed experience. Consider what happens when you simply memorize a concept from a book. Your nervous system remains entirely unchanged. Memorization allows you to perform intelligence in a calm, climate-controlled room.
But the real world is rarely calm.
Well, entirely true. Integration, however, allows you to survive chaos. The person suffering from informational obesity understands the theory of resilience, but because they have never allowed an experience to break them down and rebuild them, their nervous system will still panic at the first sign of genuine instability.
I see. So we have established that collecting facts is essentially a parlor trick if it remains untested. If volume of knowledge is not the answer, our focus must shift to what actually builds that internal architecture. The answer seems to lie in the synthesis of raw experiences into recognizable patterns.
That is the core mechanism, yes. Experiences usually begin as highly isolated, intensely painful, or entirely confusing events. You go through a difficult breakup that shatters your self-esteem. You launch a business that fails publicly. You deliver a humiliating presentation to your peers.
Or perhaps you navigate a deeply toxic friendship, or even just read a completely random book at the exact right moment in your life.
Absolutely. And while these moments are occurring, none of them feel revolutionary. They feel chaotic.
They just feel like life happening to you. You were just trying to survive the day.
Precisely. But over time, the brain begins connecting these isolated data points into patterns. This introduces the concept of compression. Someone who has integrated their experiences develops the ability to process complex situations far faster than someone relying strictly on theoretical knowledge.
This is like a grandmaster in chess, isn't it? I mean, they aren't consciously calculating every possible mathematical move on the board from scratch. They have accumulated so many thousands of games that their brain compresses the visual data. Where a novice looks down and sees a chaotic, overwhelming mess of 64 squares, the grandmaster instantly recognizes familiar patterns of danger or opportunity.
That grandmaster analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of compression. The chess master does not need to analyze the board piece by piece because their nervous system already recognizes the underlying geometry of the thread.
The geometry of the threat, that is fascinating.
It is. This compression drastically reduces the reaction time between reality and understanding. When two people face the exact same chaotic situation in a boardroom or in their personal lives, their external reactions diverge based entirely on their internal pattern recognition.
So one person freezes because they see unprecedented chaos. The other adapts almost instinctively because they see familiarity.
Absolutely. The integrated mind processes the environment differently. Older, integrated minds do not move slower. They move profoundly deeper. Because their nervous system has seen the architecture of the crisis before, they bypass the initial shock.
They skip the panic phase entirely.
Precisely. They skip the panic phase and move directly into strategy. The novice is still trying to figure out what is happening, while the veteran is already solving the problem.
This pattern recognition goes beyond simple cognitive logic, you know? It fundamentally rewires the human nervous system. There's a distinct shift from learning purely from direct catastrophic outcomes to learning from subtle emotional echoes. Consider the specific example of burnout.
That is a brilliant example.
Someone who burned out once, severely, starts noticing the early architecture of exhaustion long before they actually collapse again.
They do not wait for the catastrophic failure. Because they have processed the previous experience, they feel the slight drop in enthusiasm. They notice the subtle creeping cynicism. They recognize the specific physical tension in their shoulders or their disrupted sleep patterns.
They are reading the early warning signs.
Definitely. They learn from the echo rather than waiting for the explosion.
Which leads directly into the concept of becoming dangerous. In this context, becoming dangerous does not mean becoming aggressive or ruthless, does it?
Not at all.
It means becoming incredibly difficult to destabilize. The individual carries internal physical evidence that they can survive adaptation. But let us ground this in reality for a second. Imagine you are a young entrepreneur. You lose a single major client and your nervous system completely panics. It feels catastrophic. It feels entirely identity threatening. How does the nervous system actually unlearn that physical, visceral panic?
Well, the young entrepreneur panics because their nervous system interprets the lost client as mortal danger. They have no internal historical data to prove otherwise.
They have no proof they can survive it.
Precisely. They believe the loss of this client equals the death of the business, which then equals the destruction of their identity. Accumulated experience actively weakens the illusion that every setback is final.
So the experienced individual has navigated multiple cycles of loss.
And because of that, their nervous system has learned that most endings are entirely temporary, and most crises are fundamentally survivable. Crucially, accumulated experience does not eliminate pain.
A lost client still hurts, naturally.
A lost client absolutely still hurts. A betrayal still stings. Experience eliminates unnecessary panic, not the pain itself. The nervous system achieves a state of emotional mobility. It simply stops interpreting uncertainty as an existential threat. These dangerous individuals no longer need ideal conditions to function because they have survived the unpredictable enough times to fundamentally trust their own resilience.
This raises an important question, though. Is there a danger in trying to relentlessly optimize every single trauma or failure? Where is the line between processing an experience and just agonizingly dwelling on the past? It seems there is a paradox here. If painful experiences build leverage, why do so many people suffer immensely without ever seeing a fraction of this growth? You see people who have endured decades of hardship, yet they remain entirely fragile.
Suffering alone guarantees absolutely nothing. Pain without processing is merely destruction. Reflection is the ultimate multiplier in this equation.
Reflection is the multiplier.
Indeed. Without reflection, pain simply becomes trauma repetition. The individual just runs the same miserable script year after year.
The line between dwelling and integrating, then, is entirely based on utility.
Absolutely based on utility. Dwelling is repeating the emotional loop without extracting any new data. You are simply re-experiencing the injury over and over. Integrating is extracting a specific lesson that permanently alters your future behavior.
So it changes how you act tomorrow.
Precisely. When pain is examined and interpreted, it transforms into strategic intelligence. For instance, a difficult childhood can create paralyzing anxiety, or it can be integrated to create profound hyper-awareness and empathy. Years of rejection can create bitter resentment, or they can develop immense observational precision.
Isolation can lead to deep despair, or it can be utilized to strengthen your internal dialogue and self-reliance.
Failure is the most efficient mechanism for eliminating ego illusions, but only if the individual is willing to look directly at the failure. Nothing is wasted if it is integrated. This rigorous integration process creates what we call psychological antifragility.
Anti-fragility. So it goes beyond just being tough.
Far beyond it, you do not simply become robust, bouncing back to where you started after a stressor. You actually become strengthened through the necessity of adaptation. The stress itself is the fuel for your growth.
Wow. So we have established that this internal architecture takes years of painful, integrated experience to build. It requires a willingness to face your own failures and metabolize them. But look at the world right now. We must pivot to why this specific, slow-moving human asset is becoming the single most valuable trait in the modern era. We are living in the age of artificial intelligence. Technical knowledge, fact retrieval, and basic analytical tasks are becoming incredibly cheap and instantly accessible.
Human differentiation is shifting rapidly away from possessing information and moving directly toward interpretive intelligence. The future belongs entirely to those who can synthesize and connect experiences across entirely different disciplines, human behaviors, and emotional failures.
This creates a very specific type of communication. You encounter people who speak with incredible density and gravity. Their words have actual weight because reality tested those words first. They carry scars, contradictions, and profound nuance.
They absolutely do.
Think about the modern workforce. An AI can write a flawless, technically perfect resume in 3 seconds. It can generate a brilliant marketing strategy based on historical data. But those silent skills, emotional regulation, adaptability, the ability to read a room, the capacity to completely reinvent your identity after a total collapse, those never appear on a piece of paper. Yet they are the exact capacities that determine who survives when the environment suddenly becomes unstable.
Interpretive intelligence cannot be programmed, and it cannot be downloaded. It must be forged through actual exposure to consequence. When an AI generates text, it is simply predicting the next logical word based on immense datasets. It possesses no gravity because it faces no risk.
It has no skin in the game.
Precisely. It cannot lose a client. It cannot feel the sting of a toxic friendship. When a human being speaks from processed experience, they are synthesizing failures, corrections, and adaptations. They are offering you the compressed result of their survival.
The machine gives you data. The integrated human gives you wisdom.
This is why synthesis is the ultimate leverage in an automated age. Memorization is now a commodity. Connecting the emotional reality of a failed business to the psychological dynamics of a difficult negotiation, and then applying both to a new creative endeavor that requires a human nervous system that has suffered, reflected, and integrated.
If this internal leverage is so overwhelmingly powerful, and if it is the ultimate differentiator in an automated world, we have to ask what the final barrier is. What prevents people from activating this hidden leverage? The uncomfortable truth is that many people never activate it because they remain emotionally tethered to outdated versions of themselves.
They view their current capabilities strictly through the lens of previous failures and past insecurities. They remember the person they were 10 years ago, the person who panicked, the person who failed, and they assume that is who they still are.
They miss their own evolution.
Entirely. They do not realize that reality has already upgraded them.
It is akin to running modern, incredibly powerful hardware while insisting on using a deeply obsolete operating system. You have survived the trials, you have gathered the data, but you refuse to run the new software. Growth isn't always about forcing yourself to become someone entirely new. Sometimes it is simply recognizing the leverage your past has already constructed inside you. Every betrayal you survived taught you discernment. Every ambition you pursued, even the ones that failed, taught you the mechanics of sacrifice. The architecture is already there.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this realization culminates in a state of profound calmness. The people who possess the greatest internal leverage invariably make the least noise. They completely stop performing certainty for the benefit of others.
They don't need to shout to prove they belong in the room.
Absolutely. They no longer feel the need to prove their intelligence loudly in every meeting or conversation because they fundamentally trust their internal repertoire. They realize that the goal of life is not to perfectly control every outcome. Controlling outcomes is a fragile strategy because the world is inherently uncontrollable.
The goal is to expand your perception and maintain your cognitive mobility during periods of extreme uncertainty. You don't need to control the storm if you know how to build a better ship.
The integrated individual walks into a crisis not with a rigid plan for success, but with a quiet confidence that they have metabolized enough failure to survive whatever happens next. That is true. Unbreakable leverage.
Your experiences are not just a passive library of fading memories. They are highly active, hidden leverage systems waiting to be utilized. True leverage is processed experience. Remember that confusion is very often evidence of transition, not evidence of collapse. Consider the most deeply frustrating setback or seemingly mundane failure you are dealing with right now. Ask yourself, is this just a random disruption to your plans, or is this the exact precise raw material required to build the psychological architecture you are going to desperately need 5 years from now? Trust your internal repertoire. We leave you with that thought and conclude our deep dive for today.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.